All right, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and good night to all of you out there in the world, wherever you happen to be. My name is Voice of Wind, and today we're going to take a break from the games to do a little bit of sewing. Let me bring up the screen here. There we go. My camera will come into focus eventually. I've been working on the stream a little bit, getting things fixed, and links are finally working for music, which is good. So we've got some chill music going on. Yeah, it is nice to put a face to the username. Hello, Karina Chilltime. How are you? I hope you're well. So, today, I've been working with a green screen for a while, but one of the issues that I have with a green screen and gaming is that I kind of just put it together myself, and my desk was not in the best place for that green screen. It didn't quite meet the floor, and the way that the camera was angled meant that I had to go and buy more green fabric and just kind of pin it all on, and it just sat on the floor. And while that's okay, it also means that the area where that fabric was at couldn't really be used. I couldn't open up that screen, and I kind of wanted it to be like a curtain where if I was going to do other things, like sewing or just kind of chat with you, that I would have that opportunity. And if there's all this fabric that's just kind of pinned together like Frankenstein's monster, then I can't really do that. And I don't just want to always have a green background to work with. So today we're going to go ahead and fix the mistakes that I went and made. So we're going to bring the camera down here in just a moment and hop on to the sewing. But essentially, what I've done is I'm going to take the extra fabric that I purchased, and I'm going to take the curtain that I had originally sewn together, and I'm just going to add to the top of it because my camera angles down a little bit and the two greens are just slightly off from each other, but that will allow me to only use one filter. Whereas before, I was using 3 filters because I had 3 greens that were all slightly different, and that's not very helpful. Because when you're using 3 filters like that, what it ends up tending to do is that you filter the yellow in one of the greens and the blue in another of the greens, and there's a little bit of clash at the center, and that causes this mismatch in the filtering out where it almost creates like a buzzing effect in the background, and that can be very distracting. So hopefully, when I'm done with this, I can only use one filter afterwards. It'll reduce the necessary compute time that is being done by my computer, and that will lead to better frame rates when I'm gaming, which means a better experience for you and also means a better experience for me, because it will mean that my computer is spending less time on delivering that video to you, which means I get better frame rates, which means I get a little bit better graphics, which means you do as well. So that's our goal today. So what I've done ahead of time is I've ironed the fabric, because ironing is the second most important part of sewing. If you don't spend just as much time ironing as you do sewing, you're probably doing something wrong. And I know that that sounds sarcastic, but it's really not. Ironing is the most important part of sewing, other than the sewing itself. And part of that ironing was putting a crease in the area that I'm going to cut. That way I don't have to mark where I'm going to cut, and it's going to make this first cut very easy so that I can start going into it. Then I'm going to serge around the edges of both of my panels of fabric that I'm going to sew onto the curtain I already have. And then we're just going to attach it to the top of the curtain and put a hem around the edges. So this should go relatively quickly. So I'm going to tilt the camera down. We'll go from there. And during the parts where I am sewing, I'm going to mute myself out so that you don't have to hear the sound of the sewing machine, and we'll just chill along with this music. If you enjoy any of this music, it is provided for free from Pretzel Rocks, and the links for it will be in the descriptions that you see. Yeah, I had it the right way. Right over there in the chat. So I'll see you again in just a moment. Okay, so previously we had a whole lot of extra stuff that we needed in order to make this happen, right? We had 2 sets of scissors, we had to make our own pattern, we had to do a lot of marking stuff, we had a pencil to make the first draft, and then we used magic marker on top of that, and then there was all kinds of pins for marking the fabric and all of that, and we're going to avoid most of that today because really we're just going to sew straight lines. There's nothing special to this, super easy. This is going to be one of the easier projects that we do. So all I need are my fabric cutting scissors. These are special scissors. You only ever use them on fabric. Nothing else, ever. Fabric scissors are for fabric only. The other thing we're going to need is a ruler. This is going to help me to mark for the hemline later. And then you're going to have something to mark your fabric. This is a chalk wheel. You can find it at any fabric store, but you could use Crayola markers if they wash out. Make sure to test it on fabric first. There are chalk pencils that you can use. There are other types of washable markers that you can use. So pretty much anything that you can use to leave a mark on fabric that's going to wash off later is possible for use. So those are our tools for the day. So as I mentioned, the new fabric that we're using, of course, is going to be green. Oh yeah, don't use fabric scissors on anything else. It will definitely get you in trouble with the sewist in the family. I agree. So this is our new fabric. This is the green that I'm going to add on. And you can kind of see that in this light, it almost has a bluish tint to it. So it's very important when you buy fabric for your green screen, if you're going to use a green screen, that you make sure that the fabric has either a yellow or a blue tint. And if you're going to mix fabrics because they're low at the store or something like that, that you make sure to match those colors and those tints. So this is the current fabric that I have for my green screen. So you can see the new fabric that I had is a little bit darker, and it's not nearly as dark in comparison in real life as you see here, but they are different colors. But what's important is that they have this kind of cool quality to them. This one has a little bit more of a bluish hue to it, but they both have a very cool hue. This does not have a yellowish tone to it, similar to other green fabrics that you might find. And you can compare that against other greens that you would find, you know, kind of naturally. So that's the key here. Now on the curtain that I had previously, what I've done is taken out one of the hems so that we can use this to sew against. So you'll see that this raw edge that's been serged is no longer hemmed, whereas all of the other edges have been hemmed. So this raw edge can't be seen where this dark thread is at. And so it doesn't matter what thread I'm using to serge the edge and make sure that it doesn't fray, because you're never going to see it once it's folded over and put up as a curtain, right? So I'm going to go ahead and cut right along the edge that I've ironed here, and then we're going to serge it. So we're just going to go to the music, and I'm going to get that all done, and we'll move on from there. Very nice. Okay. So we've serged around the first side of our soon-to-be curtain to add on to our green screen. So I'm just going to set that aside for a moment. I'm going to serge around the other side, and then I'll explain how we're going to take care of the hem on this, and then we will hop into that. So I'll see you in just a moment. Okay, so that takes care of the serger, so I'm not going to need to use it anymore. I also don't need my scissors anymore. We're pretty much done cutting at this point. So I'm going to set those things aside, and we'll take a look at how we're going to go about hemming. So for the hem, if I take a look at the old curtain that I'm going to be adding to, let me get some of the strings off of it. So we unpicked this older piece, right? And we're going to be sewing onto it. So we're going to put two edges together, basically. The rest, we want to hem exactly the same way. So if I take a look at this hem, just grab my tape measure real quick. The way I hemmed the old one was to hem it in about 3/4 of an inch. So if I want to use a ruler to mark off my hemline, I'm going to double that. So 3/4 of an inch doubled is 1.5 inches. And the reason I'm going to do that is because if you think about where 1.5 inches is, and you were to take this hem and unfold it, it would sit right at that 0 mark. So if I mark 1.5 inches, then I'm going to fold to the line and then sew so that that hem lines up right along that line. Similarly, at the base, I set this up to be universal so that the top or the bottom could be the curtain line. And the reason that I'm doing that is so that when I wash it, I don't have to know which side is the top and which is the bottom. I can just be lazy about it. And what that also does is it gives me an area for a curtain rod to go through. There's extra room for it. Or if I've got curtain clips, I can just clip those curtain clips to the top of it. And so this bottom hemline, I measured it for the curtain rod that I had, and I did this hemline at 1.5 inches. So I know that that's difficult to see, and my camera has a hard time focusing in, but trust me, it's 1.5 inches, and so we're going to double that to 3 inches. So that's where I'm going to draw my lines. No worries, Araz. One of the reasons that I'm doing this stream is because I know many people don't know how to sew, and I'm trying to make it easy. So I'm just adding on to the curtain that I already had because it wasn't quite long enough. So I want to make it super easy and something that really anyone can do. So the only thing I need to figure out then with this new fabric is which is the top, which is the bottom, right? And which is the sides. Because I'm going to attach this, but I want to make sure that my hemlines are correct. So I'm going to lay this out, and I'm going to hold up my other curtain, and I'm just going to verify the width on this, because I know that one side is too small. So if I lay the curtain where the curtain rod goes, there's clearly enough room here. It goes all the way across. And I know you can't see that in camera, so if I scrunch that in a little, it goes all the way out to the edge with a little room to spare, which is exactly what I need, right? So when I hem this over, and when I hem this side over, the sides are going to come out just about right. Whereas, not whereas, but whereas, if I tried to do it this way, this piece of fabric just barely fits within the camera's frame. So it fits right up to this blue mark here. And the other edge is literally at the edge of your screen there. And the other curtain, the width of it is about 4 inches off. So if I line them up on this side, yes, the mirror's edge, you can see on this side, there's an overlap of quite a bit of the finished one with the unfinished one. And the unfinished one is going to get folded over quite a bit. So that's clearly the wrong direction. So I'm going to flip this one this way, and I'm going to mark that 3-inch margin for the hemline that I'm going to put at the top. And then on the two sides, I'm going to mark in 1.5 inches so that it comes in 3/4 of an inch on the side hems. Right? So let's go ahead and do that. Yes, the other edge, the mirror's edge. I do like that. That is fun. Maybe one of these days I will actually play Mirror's Edge again. Maybe. Probably soon. I recently started a new job and it's kind of taken away all of my free time. But I've gotten to the point where I think I will have some free time again to actually devote to Mirror's Edge. So one of the nice things about having a ruler like this is that the ruler itself is clear, so I can see through it, so I can actually line up the fabric along the mark that I want for 3 inches. So each of these dark black lines that you can hopefully see is 1 inch, so I've got 3 inches in. And then the line that I'm going to mark, I'm just going to use this chalk wheel for. And I know that you're not going to be able to see it, but it's going to make that mark right along there. Come on, camera. Hello. There we go. So you can see it's made that chalk mark all along that line. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. I could also use that time to play Legend of Zelda. I do not own Legend of Zelda. And isn't Legend of Zelda only on the Switch or Nintendo or Game Boy or one of those? I'm pretty sure I have the original somewhere, the gold cartridge that went with the NES. Alright, so there's the markings for our top hem now. Hopefully this is focusing correctly. You can see that line of chalk that we made. Just make sure that it's in there well enough that I can see it when I go to the sewing machine. Alright. And then for the sides, we're going to mark in only 1.5 inches, not 3 inches. So that's about 1.5 inches. And as I've mentioned previously, these chalk wheels tend to tug in both directions on the fabric. And so to kind of prevent it from pulling both directions, or pulling only in one direction, and making this line go completely crooked, I tend to pick up the wheel and move back and forth with it repeatedly in both directions. And that helps to make sure that my fabric isn't pulling only in one direction. It helps give you a line that's a little bit more straight. So there we go. There's one marked at 1.5 inches. And now I'll go to the opposite side and do the same. Okay, so those are the lines for our first one. I'm going to go ahead and mark the second one the exact same way. Again, if you remember, the shorter side of the fabric is going to be the side that we're marking at 1.5 inches. Come on, focus. Hands are down here. There we go. So this is the shorter side of the fabric. So that's going to be the one marked at 1.5 inches. And for a project like this, this is just a green screen curtain, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So don't stress yourself out if your lines are not perfectly straight. It's not a requirement for this, and no one's going to check our work afterwards. The audience will never actually get close enough to see any of this, so it's okay to make a few mistakes here and there. Because they're never going to know. Except for you. You'll know if you see this. And I guess that's okay, but you'd have to have a pretty sharp eye to catch any real major mistakes here. Make sure I've got that line dialed in. There we go. Finish out this side. This is the 3-inch top. There we go. Okay. Now we need to get ready for sewing on this. That's going to be all of the markings that we really need. Now, there's two options for prepping for sewing this at this point. We're going to fold this and move it up to the line. And depending on your comfort level of sewing at this point, you can pin it so that it holds this line. Or you can just hold the fabric as the needle gets close to it. However, that would be really dangerous for your fingers if you're not confident in your sewing. And the last option, which is my favorite, as I mentioned, the iron is your absolute best friend in this situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab my iron. I'm going to line this up as I go, and I'm just going to iron along this. That iron is going to put a crease here that's going to help this stay down. And you can actually see, if I just crease this a little bit with my fingers, this fabric is 100% cotton, and cotton holds a crease really, really well, even without an iron. You'll see that it's actually tending to just kind of hold itself over. right? It's not perfect, but with an iron and just a little bit of steam on this cotton, it's going to hold itself over really, really nicely. And that's going to make sewing it much, much faster because I'm going to be able to avoid most of the pins. So once I'm done ironing it, then we'll probably put in a pin at the beginning, maybe one here, here, and one at the end. And 4 pins, as opposed to doing one every 3 inches or so, will save us so much time. So I'm going to step away, I'm going to iron, I'll let you hang out with the music, and when I come back, we'll take care of sewing up the rest of this and hanging it, because we'll be pretty much done at that point. So I'll see you in a few minutes. All right. So I hope you all took a short break with me while I did my ironing. Let's hop back over. I grabbed a coffee while I was at it. Hope you're all staying hydrated and healthy. I realize that coffee is not the best hydrating tool, but it's the tool that I've chosen for right now. So as you can see, I've brought out the sewing machine. That's going to help with this next endeavor. And I've also ironed out our hemlines. So you can see now, as we come more into focus, that this iron has really helped to kind of cement these hems. So as long as I'm not holding them open, as soon as I release, they pretty much fold themselves right back on in. So I'm not going to have to use any pins at all on this. So I'm going to do the 2 side seams first for these hems, and then I'm going to do the top. And that's going to help to make sure that these areas where I've got a little bit of thread left, I can kind of tuck that in and make sure that it is hidden away so that it is never seen. So we'll go ahead and go back on mute so that you can keep chilling out with this great ambient music, and we'll do this quick sewing set. And then the last step is going to be this bottom area, and that's where we're going to attach the old curtain to the new. And I'm basically just going to butt right sides to right sides, sew it together, and then we're going to sew again, almost like we did with the hemline, so that I can make sure that any of the excess weight is pulling from the top at 2 different points on the fabric, and that's going to help distribute the weight. So I will take care of that, and I'll see you in just a moment. Oh, and as far as the sewing machine goes, I know that there has been a question on things like tension and the way that you get the needle and the thread to line up, because there's a thread that comes up from the bottom and a thread that comes down from the top, right? So 2 different directions. Come on, focus. So the thread that comes in from the top loops with the thread that comes from the bottom. So you actually create a loop that links on itself, right? And you want that linking of thread to be sandwiched in between your layers of fabric. And that might be difficult for you to see, but as long as we are using the same weight of fabric on the top and on the bottom where we're sewing, I'm going to try and keep my tension even. So my tension wheel on the top of my machine here has numbers 0 through 9, and I'm going to put my tension right in between at about a 4 to a 4.5. That's halfway, and that's going to make sure that the tension between my fabric weights, those being equal, is the same, and that's going to keep those loops. And the quilter in the family has also reminded me that if the thread on the top and the thread on the bottom are different weights, one is thinner than the other, then that tension also is going to make a difference. So both of those factors come into play when you're sewing. So in this case, my fabric, top and bottom, are the same weight, and my thread, top and bottom, are the same weight or the same thickness. So my tension is going to be middle of the road. And that's going to keep the tension on the fabric, once that thread is actually in it, sandwiched in between perfectly, so that there's the even distribution of pull of thread between both layers of fabric. So let's take care of that. Okay, so as mentioned, my tension is off, and I'm not quite sure why, because it should be an even tension for this. So you can kind of see, as I bring this a little closer to the camera, that it's kind of bunched up as if it was being pulled, and I definitely was not doing that. And if I put just a little bit of an angle on this, hopefully you can make out. Let me get a little closer. You can see that the ridges of those stitches just don't look right. It's not even. So I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to troubleshoot the machine real quick. I'm going to rethread the entire machine, and I'm going to see if that helps. If it doesn't help, I'm going to change my needle, because either at this point the needle needs to be changed. It may be a little old. It might be the wrong needle type. And if that's not the case, then we will start troubleshooting other things at that point, right? Okay, so I don't know what the issue was, but I'll show you this stitch in just a moment. I rethreaded the needle, I reseated the bobbin, and it looks like everything is working okay now. I'll cross my fingers on that one, but I'm going to finish out these stitches, and then I'll give you a look. So now that we've taken care of all of those seams, I'll give you a close-up on that. So you can see now that the stitch length in between all of these is nice and even. As we get really close in there, you can see that there's none of that awkward bunching that we saw before. There's no pulling, there's no tension issues. And if we look on the back side, you can see that that stitch line of gray goes right through the line of the serger of that black that we had before, or that dark blue, I should say. So I'm actually sewing into the previous thread, so it helps to reinforce itself, which is going to help in the long run. So that's that setup. Now we're going to take our old curtain, we're going to put right sides to right sides along the bottom, and we're going to sew them together. And I know the correct sides that we're going to work with because I haven't hemmed them yet, right? So I'm going to match this side, right side to right side. That's going to be the side where I don't see the serging on 3 of the sides, right? And we'll match those up and go from there. Now, if you recall, there was a slight discrepancy that we had in the sizes of these. So I'm going to have one line up on the inside or the left side, which however you want to look at it, and I'm going to have the other line up on the outside or the right side, so that when I hang it, they meet nicely in the center, but there's a little bit wider edge on the outsides of my curtain when it's hanging, or the inside, depending on how you want to hang your curtain. That way, I don't have any issues with the way that it's hanging and the way that it's picked up by OBS and the green screen and all of that stuff. Now, you could pin this if you wanted to, but I'm going to be able to see the serged edges, top and bottom, so I don't think I'm going to worry about pinning this, and I think I'm just going to go and match up these edges as I go to help them along. So I'm going to start by getting them kind of matched up. There we go. And they almost line up edge to edge. And I'm going to make sure that the side I start on is the one that matches perfectly, so that I get that seamless transition for my green screen. And for this, we don't have to have a specific amount that we're sewing this up or hemming it. So I think I'm gonna go with about 5/8 of an inch, and my sewing machine has a mark specifically at 5/8 of an inch. So that's going to be easy enough for me to go with. I'm just gonna follow that line. So let's do that, and I'll see you once I've done that on both curtains. Okay, so I've done both of those curtains now. They are attached together, right side to right side. So we're not going to be able to see any of that dark thread, except for this very edge right here, and that's that overlap that we just discussed. However, I mentioned at the very beginning that this top piece of this curtain, this original, or the new fabric that I've gotten, that's slightly darker than the old fabric, we're going to take and treat this seam that we just did almost like a hem. And we're going to fold it up where this seam now is, and we're going to sew it so that we've got this seam up along the edge where this serged edge is. And that's not only going to hide all of that serged edge, but it's going to give us a little bit of stability for the place where these two meet. So instead of just having one line of thread, we're going to have two lines of thread that give stability where the weight of the curtain at the bottom is pulling on the curtain at the top, right? So in order to do that, I'm going to place them flat on my ironing board, and I'm going to iron to one side so that I can create a nice crease for this to lay flat, and then I'm going to sew it. So I'm going to step back again very quickly, iron this out, and then I'll come back, we'll sew that, and that's going to be the last step. After that point, we can hang it up, and we're all done. All right, so I'll see you in just a few minutes. This is a good time to stretch, get some water, take a break, and I'll see you soon. Just like that, with a quick iron, we are ready to start back up again. We hop over to the sewing cam. There we go. So, as I mentioned, all I've done is thrown an iron at this right across the room. It was a little heavy, but I managed. So what we've done is we took the join on these two fabrics and we ironed up towards the top panel. And now you can see if I even try to push this off to one side, that iron is still going to hold it down nice and secure. But we want to use some thread to make sure that that stays that way pretty much forever, right? Now, the real trick to this is the throat, or the area on my iron, or on my sewing machine where the arm of the machine comes over and the base of the machine is relatively small. And I'm going to have to fit the entire top of the curtain through that. And one of the easier ways to do that is to sort of roll up the top of the fabric, almost like a burrito. So I'm going to do that, just so I can make sure that it fits through relatively easily, because there's a good chunk of fabric here. So I'm just going to give it a nice gentle roll. And this way, when I go to sew along here, this won't get in the way anymore. So I'm going to set the rest of it off to the side. and we'll go ahead and sew this panel, then the other panel, and we'll be done. That'll be it. So I'll see you in just a moment. So one of the other pitfalls that you may run into while you're doing this kind of work, and you'll have to watch out for, is accidentally sewing the wrong part of the fabric to itself. So I'm just clipping this string here. So I got a little bit careless, and I have sewn this little bit to itself. I don't know how well you can see that in the camera there, but this should not have been there. You can see it's nice and flat beyond this, which is what it should be, and it's nice and flat beyond here, which it should be. The seam is here, not here. So I'm going to undo just that little bit, and then I'm going to go back a few inches before that, lock in the thread, and just keep going as if nothing happened. Because no one's ever going to be able to see this mistake once that green screen is activated. And when I actually have the curtain open on this, no one's going to be looking at the curtain. Or at least if they are, it's going to be folded up and no one's going to see that mistake. So this should take just a moment to undo. Just giving a gentle tug on it and running my seam ripper through. And if you have one of those teeny tiny little seam rippers that barely fits between your thumb and index finger, I highly recommend that you pick one up that has a decent sized handle on it, because if you're seam ripping often, especially if you're newer to sewing or you make mistakes often like I do, it is a lifesaver to be able to hold it more like a pencil and something that has a wider handle on it, so that you don't have to worry about the pain associated with arthritis or carpal tunnel or any of those issues. And it truly is a lifesaver. I highly recommend picking one up. I don't remember where this one was gotten from, as far as the actual seller, but I know that this was picked up on Etsy several years ago for under $20, and it was hand-turned by someone who then dyed it purple afterwards, and I absolutely love it. It is worth every penny, and it should be in every sewer's bag of tricks if they have a little extra money to spare, or they have someone who wants to find them a unique gift. So I highly recommend it. Hand-turned seam rippers on Etsy. They're worth every penny, and the end on them, the seam ripper end, can be taken out and replaced with the surgical style. Once it dulls, that can be replaced as well. They're super worth it. Get yourself one. I promise you won't be disappointed. Alright, I'm going to finish up this seam, and then we'll be done. Okay, so as I mentioned, we were going to add on the extra to our original curtain, and now as you can see, we've got a couple of strings to cut, but the only thing that we've added onto here that you're going to be able to see behind the green screen is this little tuft of dark blue that accidentally got left in here, and I can always fold that back and sew it so that it's not going to show, or just clip it off. It would be fine either way. Given that this is going to be at the center, I'm just going to fold it over and finish up that sew so it's a nice clean line. I don't think that that will ever be seen in any case, and I can always make sure that this is on the inside of the center so that it's never seen. The outside edge, again, no one's going to see this edge because it's going to be on the outside. Nothing to worry about there. And then the actual seam itself, that join, is just this nice clean line, right? No one's going to notice that set. And so, if we then take a look at how this is going to perform once it's hung up, right? I've got one string to clip here, no big deal. But let's take a look how this is going to perform, right? So let me fold it over just a bit. And we've got some lights and shadows on this, which is going to happen. But let's take a look at the filters, right? So here we have my display capture, and we are looking into the abyss currently. So let's see if we can fix that a bit. But what I want to do is take a look at the camera, right? So if I open the camera's filters, this is the key, right? So this is what the camera is capturing right now, and I'm going to add a filter, right? So I'm going to add chroma key, and you can see now it's almost captured the whole thing just with green, but I want to lower the similarity on that. Normally my similarity on this is around 60 or so for a single filter. And instead of doing the key color of green, I'm going to do custom. I'm going to turn the effect off. I'm going to select a color, and I'm going to grab a color from the screen. So let's select from the left-hand side this darker color, and let's see how well that performs. That's almost got the entire right-hand side now too. So if I lower the smoothing a bit, maybe around 50. Lower the color spill reduction. And then up that similarity just a bit. Now you can see that except in the darkest shadow regions on this, with just one filter and these two very similar cool toned colors, this is going to work perfect for me. It's going to work very, very well. So I'm super excited to have this work out. I think this is going to be wonderful for our stream later today, and I hope that I will see some of you there. So that's all we've got for today. I want to thank you for joining me. Let's bring this back to the actual camera. So I'll turn off this one. There we go. And you can see that green screen filter is actually working quite well. So let's turn off the filter on that so you can see the full color again. There we go. And I'll bring the camera up so I can see you once more. That looks good. So we made some exciting things happen today. I had a green screen that was not working the way I needed it to. I was using 2 or 3 filters at a time in order to make Twitch streaming work properly so that I could stream. And what that ended up doing was causing display issues, it was causing glitches, it was causing some of the green to come in, sometimes it was causing some of my skin to disappear because of color overlaps. And that's not the way we want a good green screen to work when we're using Twitch, right? The other issue is that sometimes it would cause either my games to slow down or it would cause the capture of the games to slow down because the computer is working so hard to remove 3 different colors at once with 3 different filters that it has to struggle just to keep up with that. And now I've got this clean setup, only 1 color filter that I'm going to be able to use by just lowering that color frame down on my curtain to work with. So I think that that's going to make life a whole lot easier. This is a very, very simple sewing project. It's a great place to start for anyone that's never done any sewing before. And this is going to apply to any curtains you make, not just a green screen, right? So if you need some curtains for a bedroom or your living room or anywhere else, and you are sick of looking at blinds, or you've got an open window with no covering at all and you'd like to have some covering, this is a great place to fix that too. So stop tacking things up on the wall and throw up a curtain, right? So thank you all so much for joining me. After dinner, I will be back with Light Matter. And if you can't make it for that, this Tuesday, hopefully, I'll be teaming up again with Ellie for It Takes Two. And if not, then I will figure out something to replace that. But I will be back on Tuesday, for sure, right around 4:45 Pacific Standard Time, depending on how my work schedule goes. And I hope that you all take care of yourselves, that you're staying hydrated and healthy, that you are breathing through the jump scares that life throws your way. And I hope that you have a wonderful afternoon, evening, morning, or night, whatever it happens to be, wherever you are in the world. Take care of yourselves, friends. Bye.